Protection Committee.
Paul Anderson.
Here. Here.
Clara Andriola.
Present.
Elise Bunkowski. Here. Charlene Bybee. Here. Chris Cobb.
Here.
Jeannie Herman. Justin Ivory.
Here.
Miguel Martinez.
Here.
Okay, he's Devin Reese. Craig Wessner. Okay, you have a quorum.
Thank you very much. We'll share.
Yeah, we'll find you.
All right. So
Here.
if you do me a favor, is before you speak, make sure that you state your name for the record, please, okay? All right. With that, we'll move on to item 2.01, approval of the minutes for the December 4th, 2025 meeting of the Capital Funding Protection Committee.
Move to approve. Claire Andriola.
Nope.
Move to.
Yeah, it's you have to ask for.
Yeah. And as a reminder, we're going to allow public comment at each and every action item. So, thank you. Okay,
We don't have any public comment on this one.
okay, no public comment. With that then, I'm willing to take a motion.
Claire Andriola, for the record, I move to approve as presented.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Chris Cobb, second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Aye.
Passes unanimously. Thank you. Move on to 2.02, presentation discussion, possible action to recommend approval of the fiscal year 2027 10-year capital improvement plan and to forward the recommendation to the Board of Trustees for final approval. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Yeah, that's the one. Yeah. Great. So for the record, Mark Mathers, Chief Financial Officer of Washoe County School District. And with me is Tammy Zimmerman, Chief Facilities Management Officer, and we're going to tag team this presentation for you. Couple things before we start. As Jeannie flashed up, there's actually two documents that we would want you to refer to or see, at least see, regarding this item. The slideshow, the slide deck you know in front of you here on the screen is kind of a high-level review of the 10-year capital improvement plan, but the actual 10-year plan is this document, that looks like this. And so this provides the detail of individual projects and the year they're planned for and revenues year by year and so forth. So I just wanted to make sure that was understood. So every year we come to you with a 5-year capital improvement plan, and this year we're coming to you with a 10-year plan. And so we'll kind of explain why that difference, why we're doing that this year. And really it's in part responsive to questions we got from this committee at the last meeting. And we wanted to give you a longer-term view of our financial situation and a plan versus the 5-year plan we normally come to you with. one of the themes I think that you've heard every year that we do this, but certainly this year applies as well, is this is a plan. And so I think as Tammy will go through and as I'll go through, it will change annually. It is a plan based on what we know and project today, based on revenues we're seeing, costs we're seeing, and those are going to change over time. So every year we will come to you with a new plan, whether it's a 5-year plan or 10-year plan, with changes to the cost estimates for projects, changes to the phasing of projects, and so forth. So, and as Tammy, again, will reiterate, all of the projects here in this plan will come back to the committee and come back to our Board of Trustees for actual execution of the plan. So it is simply a multi-year plan that hopefully, will come close to the mark in terms of, kind of future phasing of projects, but there will be changes from time to time. And so why are we presenting a 10-year plan to you? It is to give you that longer-term horizon, to show you projected revenues and costs over a longer period of time, and to, as the presentation will go into, assure you of how, and provide greater, I guess, information in terms of how we plan for projects and how we plan for the future, and bottom line, how we always want to have some future bonding capacity and room to do future projects. What we don't want to do in any plan, and haven't to this point, but we want to assure you that we are not utilizing all of our future bonding capacity, say, within the next 5 years, and then that's that, and there's no more bonding capacity, and so, okay, we did everything we could in 5 years, and we're done, and now it's just, cash funding $20 million of projects a year, say. And so when we embarked on this kind of planning, some principles kind of jumped out here, and I want to share them so that, we're on the same page. I know that that WC1 funding is not infinite, but that is kind of the perception out there in the community a bit, that, okay, we voted to increase the sales tax rate, and so there's just loads and loads of money that come into the school district, and we can do all kinds of projects for the rest of time with no consideration to those revenues. That's, as you know, that's not the case. And what we have seen are flat sales tax revenues for the last 4 fiscal years. And that wasn't something we've ever modeled before. We've talked about before about during the COVID years, there was a tremendous amount of fiscal stimulus, and so we saw double-digit sales tax increases. I know the elected officials on this board have saw that for their agencies as well. But what they're seeing and what we're seeing is really, since that federal stimulus ended, very, very flat sales tax revenues. At the same time, we're seeing construction cost escalation continue. And so we have some charts to show you that. So really what guides us here in this 10-year plan is that we do need to be financially responsible and stewards of those monies, and ensure that there's monies for future generations, for future projects that may come up. And by virtue of doing that, we kind of build in some flexibility here for unexpected situations. I'll talk about kind of, the metaphor I use is maxing out your credit card. If you max out your credit card and something comes up, you have no resource then to pay for that, whatever is happening, your trip to the hospital or whatever. So we don't want to max out our credit card here. We want to always have some room, some bonding capacity to do necessary projects in the future that may come up. So again, we are presenting to you for the first time this year a 10-year plan. We have done 10-year plans in the past in the background. Statutorily, we're only required to present a 5-year plan to you. But again, hopefully, I've explained well enough kind of the reasons for, again, this 10-year plan. So again, state law just requires a 5-year plan. The idea here is that we would present this 10-year plan to you. Hopefully you approve it. Maybe there's changes, but at some point you approve that 10-year plan. Then that 10-year plan will go back to our board, and then we'll take back the first half of that, the 5-year plan, to our board at some later date. So they'll all be lockstep and linked together. But again, we wanted to share a 10-year plan with both you and our Board of Trustees. So, as we've talked many years, for many years now, the CIP basically operationalizes our facilities modernization plan. That was the plan we contracted for, and that was presented to the board and approved several years ago, that lays out phased modernizations, consolidations, and so forth of the district's facilities. And part of that is consolidation of schools, as we've seen falling enrollment. So what the CIP does then is execute that plan articulated in the facilities modernization plan, also aligns to the repurposing of schools and the consolidation of schools that the board has taken action on, aligning that to student enrollment trends. It is also based on the facility condition index, and we continue to budget for an annual capital renewal plan that includes repairs, upgrades to our existing schools. That is, we've gone from a $20 million annual capital program to a $50 million annual capital program. So that continues to be a very serious investment of the district. And then, as we've talked again before, there's a tremendous amount of financial modeling we do as we look at cash funding facilities when we can, but also bonding against future revenue streams. So all of those things come together as we put together this plan, and that has produced changes to the plan compared to prior years. And so I'll turn it over to Tam to kind of highlight some of those changes.
So the changes that you'll see in the CIP really are the or the reduction of our modernization budgets, right? Talking about having enough money to do all the projects we want to do. So we've modified those in this year's CIP to be reduced. You'll also see a change from rebuilds or reconstructions, as we call them, to modernizations to help maintain that revenue for future projects. In that, there'll be other changes as well to align the educational specifications for a modernization, which will really define that modernization scope for us in a little bit more detail so that we can be a little bit more diligent to actually work towards that budget with it. As Mark said, we will still continue our capital renewal because I've said it a couple times, that's our bread and butter. That's what replaces all of our buildings and our building systems after the life cycles have ended. But at this time, too, within this, you will see no additional new schools. And that's something that, as you guys, we talk about this all the time. We model, we look at those scenarios. We talk about development all the time. And we keep on modeling and keep up with those developments that come through the jurisdictions to know what we have to do in the future. And we have flexibility, and we will, if that we need one, we could put those in the capital improvement plan. But right now, we don't see a need for those.
So again, just to kind of frame this, as we've talked many times before, really there are two main sources for the district's capital improvement program. These are dedicated sources for capital projects of the school district. The first of those we know very well, and that is the WC1 sales tax that has produced more than 60 million, but as you can see here, we've really flatlined in terms of that sales tax growth. We saw a little less than 64 million in fiscal year 22, and that's only grown to 67 million in fiscal year 25. 26 doesn't look appreciably better yet, but there's problems with the state reporting a sales tax. Hopefully we'll see some growth, but right now we're not assuming growth going into 27 and 28. Nor 29, but normalizing thereafter to kind of an annual rate of 5%. The school district also receives a share of property taxes, 38.85 cents. Again, that's restricted to payment of debt service or cash funding capital projects and equipment. That revenue has been fairly strong over the years for obvious reasons, and so we've assumed here for our plan just annual 5% growth. And we've seen actually in excess of that the last 3 years, but to be conservative, 5%. So let's talk a little bit more again, comparing revenue growth to the cost escalation we've seen for our schools. What this slide shows you is on the orange line is the cost per square foot for elementary schools we've built. And so what we've seen is from 2018, shortly after passage of WC1, through 2024, costs have increased 79%, almost double for an elementary school. At the same time, combined revenues, WC1 and property taxes, have increased 51%. Again, and that's the blue line here. That probably look far worse if we had kind of what we would expect to be normal property tax years. But again, we've seen kind of very strong growth in that area, so that's helped. But we're still lagging, as you can see, and there's still quite the gap between how fast construction costs are increasing versus revenues. And that is kind of the impetus of our, desire to model this out 10 years. Just our money is not going as far as it used to, is the bottom line. And so we do have constrained revenues, and we've got to acknowledge that and factor that into our future planning. Maybe someday that reverses and those two lines start to catch up with each other, but at the current time, we haven't seen that. And so really, that's what informs the preparation of the 10-year plan. We had never, again, modeled 4 straight years of flat sales tax growth. We're now seeing this. We've got to acknowledge that fact. So our revenue projections for sales tax have kind of been modified accordingly. The other concept I want to share with you, I've mentioned it, is bonding capacity. So like most agencies, right, we have revenue streams that can go to pay debt service. And those revenue streams produce a certain amount of bonds we can afford to pay. And so when WC1 was first passed, that was producing close to $50 million a year at the time. We had no debt. Over time, we've issued bonds to pay for the numerous schools that we've built. And right now, we're using roughly 50% of those sales tax revenues to pay debt service. And so we can go all the way up technically to 100% of that revenue stream to pay for debt service. But with sales tax, we wouldn't want to do that. There's inherently volatility in sales tax. So again, we want to make sure that we are cognizant of our future bonding capacity and what we can afford to issue. And we always want to leave a little bit of room there for future bonds. So this next slide depicts that. And here, the slide on the left shows you our rollover bond debt service versus property tax revenues. And what we've tried to maintain is that positive gap. So property taxes here are the blue line and are in excess of debt service. And so over each year of the next 10 years, we've tried to preserve that additional capacity. We feel like 5% coverage, what we strive for is a minimum 5% coverage or buffer between revenues and debt service. And so what this shows you is we've tried to preserve 20% coverage or 120% coverage so that, again, even after 10 years, we've got room to issue a sizable amount of debt, in this case, $150 million more of additional debt. Then we'll have future growth of property taxes, and we'll continue to see rollover bonds mature. So that'll give us additional capacity after 10 years. But again, the kind of metaphor I use is this is like your credit card limit, right? You've got household income, right? You're allowed so much credit card debt. And what we're trying to avoid is maxing out our credit card debt, maxing out the capacity to issue bonds against this future projected revenues, if that makes sense. The chart on the right is our sales tax. Here we strive for 125% coverage. Again, just recognizing the volatility of sales tax and always wanting to be able to pay our debt with current year revenues. Here you can see, again, blue line is the revenues, the orange line is debt service. At the end of 10 years, we'd have 145% coverage. And again, we want to preserve that room so that even after 10 years, there's the bonding capacity to continue issue bonds for school modernizations, new schools if we need them at that point, other capital projects. And so this was really what drove our modeling of the 10-year plan, is to intentionally preserve capacity for the future. And so we scaled back projects. We wanted to recognize, again, the flat revenues we're seeing. We've scaled back projects to preserve this capacity for the future. Again, a very fiscally conservative approach, but one we think is prudent and appropriate for these times. If conditions change, we can always modify this anytime during those 10 years. But at this point in time, we've just seen enough flat revenues. We feel compelled to kind of make these adjustments that you'll see.
Thank you, Mark. So with major projects that we have, the comprehensive budget revisions, as Mark has spoken about with our reductions, I'll provide you a little bit of major project updates and then project scope adjustments throughout these next slides. So while it sounds ominous in the financial situation, we still have the ability to do everything that we promised within the facility modernization plan. We'll be able to continue all of those projects in just a little bit different format than we had proposed previously, being good stewards of our finances. But right now, we're in the midst of modernizing Reed High School. And if you've been over there, you see the progress. It looks really cool, the color of the block. That field will be redone. And so that's what you can see taking place and what will transfer to our other projects. For FY '27 and '29, you'll see construction and design phase funding for Sparks High School and McQueen High School modernizations. You guys already approved a little bit of funds for Sparks High School, and we've hired an architect based off of that. But Sparks is unique. That brick architecture is going to take some work. It's going to be a fun project, but we still have sufficient funds to do what we needed to do at Sparks. And so we're excited about that project. Next, we'll move on to McQueen. McQueen High School was scheduled for a modernization as well. That's quite a bit of funding, between 65 and 75 million for a modernization. We'll take some lessons learned from Reed High School into that project and still be able to provide a customized solution for that community and for those students in concert with what we wanted to do in the facility modernization. And the poster child for WC1, those portables, we'll get to say goodbye to those portables like we did at Reed. So that would be tremendous. I know we have a previous Capital Funding Protection Committee member who would love to see those gone. I think we'll have him out there when we demo them, right? Also, in keeping with the scope recommendations, we had a North Valleys High School modernization on the previous CIP. We've changed the timeline of that a little bit for several reasons, just because there's a lot of activity happening out in the North Valleys. We have some development that's coming. We have some charter schools that are coming as well, and we want to be able to time it appropriately so that we put the right type of improvements out there for those students with extended capacity and the modernization out there. So trying to be thoughtful with other development and other pressures that we feel to make sure that we're doing exactly what those students and staff need out there. So Sparks Middle School and Trainer Middle School campuses are programming for FY '27 and '29. These two schools were mentioned within the facility modernization plan as Sparks Middle School receiving a rebuild. We've changed that to a modernization with this, and we have Swope Middle School to look at for that modernization. And if you've ever walked through Swope Middle School, it's pretty fantastic. So I think we can do a lot with our existing assets to bring that to fruition and make that facility modernization, out there for those students and staff as well. Their budgets are $55 to $65 million as well. With the next phase of Trainer, once Sparks Middle School is rebuilt, the idea is that those students from Trainer Middle School would be moved to Sparks Middle School, and then Trainer would become an elementary school. And with that, we're talking about a modernization on the Trainer campus as well for an elementary school. And again, it'll be similar to what we see at Swope, except maybe not a middle school size, but it'll be a great elementary school with those same type of additions to it that we've done at Swope, with group rooms and enhanced fixtures and features for them. Worcester High School. It's another example of a change and a revision to it. we're addressing what the community needs with the modernization. We have some examples with existing buildings that we've done that too, and they've had great success with new fixtures, furnishing, new finishes on them. It was previously proposed as a reconstruction, but we're programming 65 to 80 million for that entire campus to be modernized for those students over there as well. The substantial budget will still allow us to provide those opportunities for those students over there. We're also, this is a placeholder in the CIP for it because we're allowing time for decisions to be made and us to be flexible on that campus. So we need some time, and that's why it's programmed into FY '31 and '33 to allow those decisions to be made so that they're known, and then we can adjust to those and produce a modernization for that school. The Admin Central Service Office. The board is currently in the midst of a study to decide where an Admin Central Service Office will go. The project has been in the CIP for the last 3 years and has been identified with this group and with the community. And so we're looking at the 2030, 2031 for completion, but we need that time to let those decisions complete to let us know where our next steps are with that. The budget is very preliminary, as Mark has stated. We've put placeholders in there with the best thinking we have now, and we can come back and revise those because that's what we do with this blueprint plan that we have. Talk about a little bit of our new elementary school on the Pine campus. You guys are very familiar with this. You guys have approved the design phase for that, and it's on the agenda in the next couple steps. But it's anticipated for completion in school year 28-29. We left this as a reconstruction because we're so far along in the process with that. We can talk some more about some elementary schools. We have Maxwell and Booth Elementary School that are listed on there as modernizations in FY '30 and '33. There's still a healthy budget on there to achieve a modernization and provide those spaces that were outlined in the facility modernization plan as well. We also are still performing or getting ready to perform the enhancements at Booth for the 27-28 school year, which we did in concert with the construction of Loader. We believe some of these unique designs will suit the communities because we'll be able to specialize or put items in there that are special to that community to help them in the future. Some of our specialized schools that we have, Piccolo, Natchez, and Gerlach, serve really unique communities, and they're listed in this CIP for modernizations, and we'll be able to address the needs of the community and the staff with that as well. We want to touch a little bit on our elementary schools that are considered our pinwheels and our pods. You have seen or approved Matthews Elementary School, which is under construction, and we had an event yesterday with a signing for the students, kind of like a topping out, which was really cool, and the building looks amazing and has spaces for them that they needed to allow Kate Smith to move over. But we're looking at the rest of those, what we call pinwheels up there, Allen, Bennett, Alice Smith, Silver Lake, and Desert Heights, for those same type of modernizations. And as we spoke previously, the capital renewal program, it's our bread and butter. It replaces our building systems and when they end the life cycle. We will continue that, and it hasn't been reduced because we have a lot of sites that need those improvements every year to stay what we used to call safe, warm, and dry. But those are hundreds of projects that are listed in our capital renewal plan that you guys will see in June of 2026, our annual approval of that, and we will work on those throughout the next FY '27 to bring those all to fruition. But they will come for their individual approvals to the board once you guys approve the capital renewal plan.
So just real quickly, this is just a pie chart again, showing you kind of the 10-year summary of resources. Again, we've talked about, property taxes and WC1 being our two main sources. And so you can see there we plan to bond a little bit more than $1.2 billion of rollover bonds over 10 years. The remainder, and I should have said, for that cushion we always try to achieve that does roll into our fund balance, and then we can cash fund projects, smaller projects. So, which is great because we avoid the interest costs. So there's a little less than 200 million there of cash funding using property taxes. And then you can see $350 million of WC1 bonds are planned, with a sizable amount, 221 million of, again, WC1 revenues that'll be used to cash fund or pay, do pay-as-you-go projects. And then this breaks out, again, kind of the types of projects, if you will. Again, you can see modernizations, a little less than 50% of the total spend over 10 years, reconstructions being another 10%, capital renewal being, again, almost a third of the pie. One of the things I think that, we've heard from the committee before is, I think a concern about perhaps downsizing the plan in the past, or at least from some of the committee. So what we wanted to do was compare the first 5 years of this 10-year plan to past 5-year CIPs. And that's what's shown on the right. So we've kind of bounced around between 1.1 billion and 1.3 billion over 5 years. Still a tremendously significant, huge 5-year plan. What is proposed here in the first 5 years of this 10-year plan is not inconsistent with that. It's 1.1 billion. So again, while there's been some downsizing of projects to be more cost efficient and to reflect kind of the lower revenues and resources we project, it's still in the context of a 5-year capital plan, a huge plan. So just kind of wanted to make sure you saw that, and that's the comparison we've provided.
So in conclusion, we have shown you guys the changes and that we expect to see in our future years. There's the continued cost increase of construction, right, compared with the revenue. We're going to maintain the facility modernization plan intent, right? There's still going to be lots of projects going on in our schools to make that promise kept, and we're adjusting solutions to meet the revenue that we have. We're still going to be investing in our existing facilities so that they can meet the educational spaces and needs of our students.
All right, thank you very much. We'll open up for questions from our members. Mr. Ivory.
Okay, I got, I don't know, half a dozen or so, I guess. Justin Ivory, sorry. The pay-as-you-go, is there a simple explanation as to what's overall better for the district on the pay-as-you-go, or using that as bonding ability? The reason I ask is I get the fact that we can save the interest on the pay-as-you-go, but we can also leverage that. Perhaps maybe it would help to let us know, like, how much $200 million in pay-as-you-go, how much you can leverage that for in bonding capabilities.
Well, it wouldn't, so Mark Mathers, for the record, it's not 200 million in one shot, right? That's 200 million over 10 years. What we model, and we do numerous iterations of this, we look at the proposed pacing of projects from our capital projects department. So there are realities about how much projects we can push out in a year based on, staffing capacity, the construction industry's capacity, and a number of other factors. And so we start with capital projects kind of outlining, here's the pacing of projects we want. And then we're going to model bonding for those projects. We can't wait for cash to build up to do $65, $75 million modernization. So we know we have to bond those. And so we're modeling that proposed debt service. There were, in our initial plan, there were choke points where the revenues did not support the issuance of bonds that were needed to execute the project. So that's when projects maybe move forward or backward. So that's the kind of financial modeling we do. Really, So our first kind of thrust is to issue debt, because again, there's so few projects, at least in the recent past, that we can cash fund. But for $10 to $15 million projects, we can do that. Again, what we try to maintain is a cushion or coverage factor on our debt. That's, rating agencies certainly look at that. We look at that. And so any monies that we're not utilizing to pay for debt service, again, revert to the fund and can be used to cash fund projects. So it's kind of the second order of operations, if you will. First is, for those large facilities, what can we bond within our revenue streams? And then annually, that amount of coverage that we maintain can be used to do pay-as-you-go projects.
Okay. How are we figuring out on like the time frame? Because obviously we brought consultants in for creating the modernization plan, right? Have we used the same group again to redesign the new, where we're changing from rebuilds to modernization, like what we did at Reed High School? Like what, beforehand, we had like a new school like we did we're doing it, Swope down there on Vassar, or not Swope, but Vaughn on Vassar, versus like what we're doing at Reed. What?
So we are using, for those previous projects, like Reed was always scheduled for a modernization out of that plan. Vaughn was scheduled for a reconstruction. Based off of the cost of construction, we've looked at what those modernizations are versus a rebuild, and moved to that portion of move to a modernization in order to save the funding for future projects, while still giving them in that modernization, just like Reed, all of the amenities that they're lacking based off the educational specifications.
So that was an internal thing with staff, or did we, that's what I'm trying to figure out. Did we
It was
use
an-
that same,
Nope,
that
it was,
same
we didn't.
group?
We didn't hire a consultant to do that.
Okay.
We did that internally, because we feel like we have a good pulse on what the needs are and what we can provide within that dollar amount.
Okay. Okay. Back to the amount we're spending every 5 years, because I know it's something that I've been looking at for quite a while, because it's always been such an impressive number. So in the past, that number was working up towards, every year we would get, we would look at the 5-year plan, and every year it was looking like it was trending upwards. We were getting, I think we started probably like 1.3, 1.4, somewhere in there. I think the last time we saw it, it was like 1.6 over a 5-year plan, was in the 25-29 project list. We had a 1.6 figure. Now we're drawing our way down, and if I'm doing the math correctly, over the next 5 years now, we're going to spend roughly a 1.2 billion, or I'm sorry, we're going to bring in roughly a $1.2 billion amount, and then the following 5 years after that, we're going to drop down to $820 million. You're explaining to me that sales tax is flat, property taxes increased a little bit, which has helped offset the flatness in the sales tax, is my understanding. So then I guess my question would be, why are these numbers dropping so significantly?
Let me get to that slide. So to clarify, you are correct. The total planned expenditures in the current 5-year capital improvement plan are $1.6 billion. And so if your question is, well, then why does it show 1.2 billion there? Couple reasons. First, within the 1.6 billion is roughly 300 million of debt service payments. So what I wanted to do is kind of an apples to apples, just the amount budgeted for construction projects. And so that's why the number for 2630 CIP is 1.2 billion. That's what we programmed in the current CIP, the current fiscal year CIP, for construction projects. I stripped out debt service payments, because you don't really care about that. You want to see what projects are funded. And then in the 5-year CIP, there is the Government Services Tax Fund, which is not shown in this 10-year plan. Normally, that's not a focus of this committee, and those pay for, I don't want to say minor projects, but repairs, again, a number of smaller projects. So the GST fund is not shown in these numbers here on this slide. So that's the explanation for the differences between, if you were looking back and say, well, gosh, we approved a $1.6 billion plan. You did, but it included non-construction projects in there. So what this tries to show you is, in the current year, in fiscal year '26, total construction projects totaled $1.2 billion. What we're proposing here is a $1.1 billion program. And
So-
again, it's done out of an appreciation for the flatter revenues that we now have to recognize in this plan. And again, the re-review that we did to preserve future bonding capacity past even year 10. And again, the notion is it would be easy for us to just bond for as much as we possibly could in the next 5 years, and then be left with a situation like we had before WCC1, where we've tapped out our bonding capacity, there's no more ability to issue debt for major projects, and now you're working off of incremental income, which is much, much lower. So we just didn't want to put ourselves in that situation. That doesn't seem like it'd be very fair for future generations.
No, and I understand that, and I certainly appreciate that. Just so I'm clear, the numbers I'm looking at off previous years is our resources, not our expenditures.
Okay.
So,
And-
I
and-
guess my question is, what you're basically saying, or at least the way I'm hearing it, is we're going from, the reason the numbers are reducing on the resources is because of debt obligations have increased?
The resources consist of two things. They consist of the proceeds of future bonds issued, as well as revenues. And so revenues, we're not as aggressive in terms of projecting this year than maybe we were 3 years ago, not imagining we'd see 4 years of absolute flat sales tax growth. And then in terms of future bond issuances, again, we've tried to kind of, again, preserve capacity, so there's been some reduction in the amount of future bond sales. So that's the resource side. What this shows is the expenditure side of the ledger, and how we're still, in my view, still in the same ballpark. If you look at 3 years ago, the 5-year CIP showed $1.18 billion of projects. Now we're showing $1.08 billion of projects. We're not that far off from past years, is all we're trying to show here.
And I totally get that, and part of the reason for making changes on whether you get a new school or whether you get a refurbished school has to do with really more construction costs than anything else.
That's right.
So I understand that. I am going to have to take a look at one other item in here that I don't think we covered, but it's certainly in here, and it's one that concerns me a lot. And that is the the refresh, and now it's called a refresh with textbooks. So this is the creep that I'm always talking about, right? The creep that just keeps creeping in there. We're the oversight committee, right? And we're supposed to be the wall that says, no, we're not going to do this, and we're not going any further. Because here's what I'm seeing on this proposed 10-year budget. I'm seeing that we're reducing numbers and we're reducing scopes on buildings, but we're increasing numbers and increasing scopes on the IT device refresh and textbooks. So I need some explanation on this.
Okay. So in the current CIP, we budget $5 million a year for PC refresh. As you probably know, the district faced a sizable deficit, operating deficit, this current year. Textbooks are considered equipment and are considered a capital item pursuant to an Attorney General Office opinion. And so we raised the issue of whether this district wanted to use capital funds to pay for textbooks, like at least one other district does currently, and like a number of districts are considering. And the direction from the Board of Trustees was to proceed on utilizing capital funding to pay for textbooks. That's $3 million a year. Rather than add $5 million a year for the PC refresh that we currently budget to $3 million or more for textbooks, and get to between $8 to $10 million a year for the combined PC refresh and textbook line item you see here, we are downscaling the PC refresh program. We think we can still replace devices at the same pace as what we do now, but skinny down the number of devices for lower elementary school grades. There's been a lot of literature, you probably read, that screen time for younger children is probably not a healthy thing. So we've decreased the PC refresh program to $3.5 million, and then added, pursuant to that vote by our Board of Trustees, $3 million a year for textbooks to be funded by capital funds.
And I'll just address the committee on this one. I think we're stepping over stuff here that is our job to not step over. We've been approving this, approving. I know we talked about this particular item last time, which was when it was just the IT device refresh, where it was like, at what point do we stop funding it, right? What about when we break this out to a 30, 40-year plan? Are we going to start spending as much per year on this as we used to spend on a building, on an elementary school? At what point do we stop? And I feel like as long as there's a pile of money over here, the creep is going to continue to happen. And I'll name all the things that we never used to buy out of capital improvements, right? Laptops for teachers, that all came out of general fund money. Doesn't anymore. We pay for it all out of capital improvement. The IT device refresh, never. We didn't have it before, so it's brand new. Buses. There's a lot of stuff that all of a sudden becomes a short-term asset that we're buying with capital improvements when really, in my opinion, what the taxpayer was sold on with WC1, and I understand that not everything is bound by the WC1 language, but you'd have a tough time explaining to the taxpayers in this community that when we signed on for WC1, that we were saying what we want to do is we want to create a revenue source that allows the district to build new schools that we desperately need. And what we want you to do is take the other revenue, the property tax money, whatever the other, all the other packages of money, and you can go and start slowly working that back into the general fund, right? And I can't think of one taxpayer that would be like, yep, that's what I was voting for. So I'll be honest with you, I mean, this creep has gotten further and further and further, and I'm to the point now today where I'm a hard no. Just over this little item, and I don't want to slow up any budgets. I don't want to create extra work for people, but there's a certain point where I feel like my obligation to this committee is oversight. And right now, what I'm seeing is a creep that is going too far. It's reached too far now. We've agreed to it on many occasions. I'll get off my soapbox, but I'll be a hard no today.
All right, thank you. Any other questions? Yes, Member Andriola?
Thank you, Claire Andriola. Ironically enough, I had that marked without you saying it. But I do think it would be prudent for us to get clarification. You've already shared the AG's opinion, you've already shared. But I think what makes it difficult is, in the short period of time I've been here, I have seen some of this. And so I think it would be helpful to actually have a clear opinion about what this is and what qualifies for that, and how that legally correlates to what, I mean, this body is here because of the passing of WC1. That was part of the legislative provisions that were approved. And so I just think it would be helpful to understand, so that everyone has a level playing field of what those guardrails are. And I think it would be helpful for everyone. Those that are new, those that have been here for a long time, I just would ask that we maybe look at that clarification, and then we're presented that information so that we know. That would be a request. I do have a question. Thank you. I always feel like all of a sudden now we're so formal, I feel like I'm at the legislature again. Clary Andriola for the record. My question is, I see well, first of all, thank you, because making an adjustment, I think everyone is doing that, and being flexible and looking at how to stretch those dollars is obviously evident, and the rework of all of this. And I see, the growth projections and all of the data that was used to help analyze what needed to be done. But what I don't see, and I don't know if there's correlation related to this, is the decrease in enrollment of kids, of children, and what that projection looks like. And I'm not suggesting that anyone has a crystal ball of exactly what that looks like, but there are projections. And I'll just give you some information that might be just of interest. So several months ago at the Washoe County Board of County Commissioners, I asked for a presentation during our budget workshop that included a national firm, if you will, from an economic standpoint, to give us what that looked like. And then we looked at that, and then we came down to just our area. And the national average of people moving falls into the ages of, I think it was 30, 33 to maybe 60 or something like that. But here, and that's only at 30% for the national average, 55%, you want to know what at least the projections that we saw? From the ages of 18 to 39. 55% are 18 to 39. I don't necessarily want to get into the biological part, but those are children-bearing ages. And more importantly, there also is a correlation to choices of not having children or as many children. So there's a decrease of, at least projection, of children. And so I'm just wondering, if you're looking at all of these schools and we're looking at growth, I realize that if you have a school and you have a maximum capacity, and I realize it could accommodate less, but I don't see any correlation of some of those statistics that are out there. Just wondering how that bears into it.
So our facility modernization plan that was approved in 2023 addressed that declining enrollment that we're seeing, and also that consultant went into and looked at birth rates. They looked at our existing schools. We project out some of those based off of count day, what those enrollments will be. And we're in the midst right now. You'll see some schools aren't listed on there because we have come to the board and we have approval to close Corbett Elementary School, Veterans, based off those, Smith Ridge and Dodson, right? We're building a new elementary school on the Pine campus, but we're combining schools and getting rid of or repurposing those other schools in anticipation of and because of the decline in enrollment. So while it's not written and there's no statistics in here with that, that facility modernization plan is an answer to that.
Well, I appreciate it. Thank you. That was the reason for my question, because it wasn't in here, and that's a fact.
And we are anticipating it at every turn.
Okay, appreciate it. And then I have one more question, Mr. Chair. Thank you. On the page that, we're all looking at that has all of the numbers, on the back side of it, or the second page where it says future FMP modernization projects, you've got the 2027 through 2029, and then the remainder of the 7 years don't have anything, and I'm just wondering if you could explain that.
That specific line item is to procure dollars within the future, the CIP for anything that comes up that is unforeseen, that we might need to tackle with some design or construction based off of enrollment projections, based off of movement of our population, based off of decisions that have yet to be made.
Okay, and what threw me is that there isn't anything from 2030 to 2035. So
So-
that's what I'm wondering.
Just because that allows us within the near future, based off decisions, to make some improvements or work on some construction projects that need to happen based off those decisions. The rest of the FMP, Facility Modernization Plan, is planned within the rest of
Okay.
those schools, and they're listed. And then we'll come to another 10-year CIP beyond this with the rest of them to finish that plan and keep that promise.
And I was wondering if there was a contingency factor in that particular line, and that's where I was going, because if there was a contingency, and I realize the schools go out all the way through it in the appropriate place, including no Spanish Springs on here, by the way, so.
Spanish
saw
Springs is
that.
one of our new schools,
Yeah, I
so
saw
newer
that.
schools.
I saw that. But that's what I was just looking for the clarification, because if it looked like contingency, then obviously this could be adjusted as new projections come into play, and then information is then, okay.
Yes.
So this is essentially what you're asking, Mr. Chairman, the last clarification question is, you're asking, and I know you had it in the slide in terms of the process of approval, then it's going to go to the Board of Trustees, and then to meet the compliance requirement, the Board of Trustees will look at the 5-year CIP. That's what I
Yes.
saw. This is just looking at this as presented as a guideline that may be subject to changes, that may be surprises that come up. So this isn't set 100% in stone, but it's certainly, being framed as you don't see at this moment this changing.
Correct. It is a plan. We come back, just like we said, every year, and we revisit it. We can come back within the year to revisit if something happens and we need to.
Is there a timeline, I said one question, one more. Is there a timeline that needs to be met from a compliance standpoint in this process? And I'm asking because I thought that there might be an opportunity to look at the clarification that I originally asked in my very first statement prior to actually approving this, so that we could get the clarification on the IT device refresh and textbook.
So Mark Mathers for the record, yes, there is a timeline. What drives our spring CIP planning is the requirement for us to file a budget, an operating budget, in school district's case, by June 8th. And so statutorily, what has to happen is the first year of the CIP is budgeted in our operating budget under the capital projects funds. So we need to lock in at least year one in time to file that fiscal year 27 budget. And then we have our final hearing in late May, just like I think you do.
Yeah, we do.
So late May is really the timeframe that we must have a CIP adopted by the Board of Trustees. And so what we're trying to do is accommodate any interplay between this committee and the Board of Trustees, right? They would have to take the CIP approved by the Capital Funding Protection Committee and consider it. If they have changes to it, then it would have to come back to the Capital Funding Protection Committee and then go back to the Board of Trustees. So conceivably, there's 2 rounds for each body to finally adopt a CIP. So we're trying to work within that timeframe.
Okay.
If I could, I'd like to answer the legal question that you raised. Again, we do have an Attorney General opinion that says textbooks can be considered equipment. Within current state law, it does allow for property taxes to be used to fund equipment. So there's the connection, right? WC1 parameters are different. There was a ballot measure, and we cannot buy textbooks at a WC1, and we're not proposing that here. We're proposing to use property taxes where NRS 385 does allow for repairs, upgrades of buildings, purchase of buses, and purchase of equipment. So textbooks, buses, and devices are all equipment, defined as equipment, and therefore they are eligible uses of property taxes. And we have had bond counsel review that plan, and they are in full agreement that these are eligible expenses to be used out of property taxes. We're not the only agency that uses capital funds to pay for equipment. That's very common. And so I appreciate the perspectives here, but we are within the bounds of normal capital budgeting by using capital funds to pay for equipment.
So for clarification on that, then what we're seeing is obviously the combination of WC1 and the property tax distribution and the projections that you have. Would that be correct then, based on what you just said?
So within the capital program, the actual 5-year capital improvement program, and even for this 10-year program, we allocate funding for WC1 funds for specific projects. We allocate property tax money for specific projects. So we go through analysis of what is eligible to be spent out of property taxes, and only projects and equipment and other types of expenses that can be expensed against property taxes are. For WC1, again, it's a little bit more restrictive, and so we do have, we're showing you a summary here. This is combined resources and expenditures for the whole plan, but there are distinct budgets for WC1 versus property taxes.
Well, I appreciate it. I think that may be where some of the confusion lies, because as I mentioned, I had highlighted that as well. And so I don't know, I'm not asking for your format to necessarily change, but I think a note and a clarification is important. It gets on the record that way, and then it's not, there'll be no inference of anyone drawing a different conclusion than what you just stated.
I think that's very fair.
Yeah, thank you, sir.
Member Bybee?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So on that point, I'm curious, in the past before WC1, through all the years, were devices and textbooks paid for with property tax or sales tax, or how did it, has it always been property tax? And that's why, and I mean, I appreciate the clarification on the two from WC1 to property tax, and that makes me more comfortable. I'm just curious, before WC1, where did those funds come from?
Tammy may want to comment. I mean, before WC1, the use of devices by students was not nearly as prevalent as today. So we've seen technology change. And then with COVID, right, we needed to have the ability for a child to take home a device and do their homework because they couldn't come into the schools, at least on a hybrid basis. And so prior to WC1, sure, there were staff devices, but we didn't have nearly the number of student devices that we are required to today. And, you know, as I noted, kind of the research and the literature and what other nations do has changed a lot. Scandinavia was, I think, the first set of countries that gave a device for every child, and they thought that was the greatest thing, and so they kind of paved the way. And so what you read in the last several years is a recognition, again, of younger children that screen time is actually not a healthy thing. So they've kind of peeled back on the number of devices for the lower elementary school grades, which is kind of what we're starting to model here, and fewer devices needed for grades first, second, third. And so that's how we can downscale the PC refresh program. So I guess in a very long-winded way, I'm trying to say that we just didn't have the number of devices that needed a replacement before WC1. It wasn't an issue. We were spending a fraction on devices before WC1 compared to today. Textbooks, I can't say for sure what the funding sources were back in the 1990s or 2000s. I'd have to go research that in terms of what that funding source was.
Okay, just curious. And sorry, I didn't say at the beginning, Charlene Bybee, for the record.
Member Bunkowski, sorry.
Thank you, Elise Bunkowski for the record. I have three things. So can you clarify if, I know our online education systems keep changing. I think we're going from Ingenuity to another one. Is that hitting the general fund, or is that eventually going to come over here as well?
No, Mark Mathers, for the record, that's been general fund funded and continues to be.
Okay, thank you. And then second, I guess, is more of a comment that I am a little bit uncomfortable with budget shortfalls in the general fund coming to this bucket of money. I understand that the decisions are made and it's within allowable space, but I do think, to Mr. Ivory's point, that it is our job to keep this money for specific capital purposes. And so with that said, my third question, I guess, is for legal counsel. Would we be able to approve this with removing the textbook component?
You could make a recommendation to approve it with the amendment, so that could happen.
Mr. Cobb.
Thank you, Chris Cobb, for the record. A few questions for you. So taking a look at your capital renewal over the 10-year, I mean, with the past 10 years, we've greatly increased the number of facilities we have. And it pretty much holds steady throughout, even drops a little in your out years. It just, based on your conversation earlier, cost everything is going up. And we're not building new facilities. It just seems we're going in the wrong direction with the capital renewal. Just your sheer volume of what now you're maintaining is even increased more. When everything's getting older, there's more to maintain, more that's going to fail. We've got a good modernization and renewal program. It appears we're going to fall short on maintaining what we have.
Tammy Zimmerman, for the record. So in the facility modernization plan, it contemplates closures and repurposing of schools, which takes those, in essence, off of that capital renewal list, because they could be repurposed for other things and divested out of our portfolio or other ways. So thinking that we won't be maintaining all of those facilities in the future.
Okay, thank you. The other question I had, and if you want to, you've got the slide for, what was it, Worcester, but then also the slide for the admin building, which is still showing Worcester, and they seem to overlap. So it's kind of like, if we're looking at a modernization at Worcester, but it's in the same time frame we're showing a picture of the admin, those seem to conflict. You wouldn't be able to do both on the same property, right?
That is to be determined based off
Okay.
the study that they're working on currently. And that's why we've asked to put this in these years to provide flexibility for that decision to be made.
Okay, because that would end up being a rebuild if admin goes to Worcester.
That's to be determined based off of the scope and what happens with that and what the needs are of that school.
Okay. And then, just as my colleagues up here have expressed, it seems like we play a slippery slope with the equipment and the definition. I do appreciate, it helped a lot identifying that is property tax, which does allow that. I would definitely love to see a giant asterisk that this, for us, WC1, that's a huge deal. And as Mr. Ivory has pointed out, I don't think the voters ever intended that is textbook money. And I think you've gone and got an opinion, and it's property tax, and it allows for that. I think that's absolutely critical for us sitting up here, being able to say, I'm approving and I'm being a steward of WC1 money on expenditures that are allowed by that money. That's our key goal here, that we're spending it properly. And that if I'm approving this, I'm approving it, and it has been readily identified that is not WC1 money. That is property tax money you have an opinion, you have a board decision that is allowing you to spend it there. That's not what I'm voting on. I'm approving a plan that meets a budget. In WC1, I'm ensuring it's being spent the right way. And while I'm approving it, you've already identified no WC1 funds are going there. That provides me a greater comfort, understanding I'm staying within the guidelines of what this committee was set up to do.
Yes, Mr. Martinez.
Thanks so much, Mr. Chair. I think listening to the dialogue and the presentation, I have my own concerns. I share some of the same concerns that were brought up, but there were conversations that happened out in the community during community advisory board meetings and neighborhood advisory board meetings where a different plan is being presented. And I think during the presentation, somebody mentioned that this is just a little bit of a different format to implement the FMP. But to me, it seems like major changes that we're including in this updated FMP. Wooster is getting moved further into the timeline, and the admin building is moving up from what I'm seeing. And I think the conflicting fact there is that when the school district was out at Pine or Veterans or Corbett, the conversations that happened and there were promises that were made that were in direct conflict to what's being proposed right now by staff. Some of the wording that I remember, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it seemed like people and residents that were in that area were being promised new facilities from K through 12. And this is pushing those timelines in a different way, in a different manner. And you're looking at, in my opinion, going against some of the promises that were made to the people living in the neighborhoods that were here. And I'm curious, based on the zoning that was passed last month, how that affects the plan today, because even that to me seems to have some incongruencies with the way that the zoning advisory, the recommendations and what was ultimately approved is different than what we're looking at today.
So Tammy Zimmerman, Chief Facilities Management Officer, for the record. So the zoning is anticipated to take effect in the school year 27-28. Those improvements at Booth and at Loader are still scheduled to be completed for that 27-28 school year. As we talked about with this is a plan. It can be flexible. It gets revisited every year as revenues change and that, and it could be modified again even next year based off of those.
Which I get, it just seems like a lot of times the FMP and the way that it's presented and approved at this committee is used as the building blocks and the structure for the plan moving forward. And so if we approve something that is being proposed today, that's going to build off of what the Board of Trustees looks at in the future. And I'm just uncomfortable using WC1s and the promise that we made to this community to use funds to impact classroom and making sure that our students have the best facilities to put, buses or textbooks or the admin building ahead on the priority list of its direct impacts to the classroom. And I understand the value and the need for the new central and admin building. I don't negate that is definitely an issue and that will help in the overall delivery of education to our youth, but that doesn't necessarily mean that WC1 in this case should prioritize that over the direct impacts to the classrooms that we promised, and we had kept repeating that during these various meetings that we had out in the community with our constituents.
Yes, Mr. Ivory.
Okay, a couple things, because obviously you hear some more stuff, so you want to go back and be sure you get this all corrected. Justin Ivory, for the record. Yes, Mr. Mathers is absolutely 100% correct. WC1 money cannot be used for buses, books, computers, any of that. Prior to, no, none of that money ever got spent on that because, quite honestly, prior to WC1, we didn't have any money. I don't know if you guys all remember, but I mean, when WC1 passed, everyone was hanging on the fact that the county commissioners were going to approve the sales tax, and we had already started planning the construction of the addition at Demonte Ranch High School. right? Because we didn't really have the money at that time to do that construction unless it was all approved. We didn't have the issue we have now because we didn't have any money for capital improvements, right? We were bonded out to capacity. So with that being said, a couple things that I feel very confident about is, yes, you've got an AG opinion on whether or not that can be used for equipment. I have no doubt in that. But I don't think you have an AG opinion, and I think if you took it to the AG and asked for an opinion on whether WC1 money could be used for that, they would quickly say, no, it's very clear WC1 money couldn't be used for that. So what I'm saying, right, I'm not saying that you can't, legally can't, definitely don't want to be clear on that. What I'm saying is this committee has an obligation to the community, and we will never be able to stand in front of the community again and say it's time to raise taxes because we have to build more schools or we have to do more things, and don't worry, we'll be good stewards with your money, even though all we have now, you know, I'm looking in the future here, but all we would have at that point is the protected money would be the WC1 money. The other money would all go towards the other stuff because they continue to get a legal opinion every year saying that they could go ahead and they could scope creep right into that account every time. That's why we were put into place. We weren't put into place to protect just WC1 money. If that was the case, then everything that on our paperwork that we have here would only say WC1 money revenue. That's not why we were put into place. We were put into place to protect the creep. That's, I don't know, I mean, I know I've been a member of this committee for several years, and I was watching this committee from the get-go. That's why we were put into place, was to protect ourselves from ourselves. Because it makes perfect sense, because we want to make sure that we take, and the kids got the proper textbooks and the most updated technology, and they have everything that we want them to have. It makes perfect sense, okay? But that's not what our job is here. Our job is to be responsible with the taxpayer money and the taxpayers' trust. So once again, I appreciate the fact that you are technically correct, but all we're doing is turning it into a shell game at that point, because we're just taking money that didn't get the heavy scrutiny of the language, right, that would have, because I can assure you that I know myself as a taxpayer who voted for WC1, I didn't look at it and say, well, yes, I looked at it and said, this should apply to all the capital funding money. This criteria should apply to all of it. We need to protect all of it. That's what I was voting for. So once again, I'll get off my soapbox for that. I have a couple other questions, and one of them is, we approve in the past, we've approved a 5-year plan. Now we're looking at a 10-year plan. Is it really just the first column that we're really approving? Because if not, if this plan doesn't get approved today, wouldn't it just revert back to last year's plan?
No, so Mark Mathers, for the record, there's a statutory requirement to annually approve a 5-year capital improvement plan.
Okay, so let me ask you this question, or I'll ask it differently. Can we approve last year's 5-year plan?
A government could choose to move forward years 2 through 5, if this is what you're saying, to become years 1 through 4 of next year, and then having to decide what to say about year 5. That could be done.
I'm looking for a way to say yes to a vote today, I guess is what I'm getting at.
I mean,
I'm not trying to put anybody in a pickle here or get a gotcha. I'm wondering if that's a possibility.
The problem with that is that we have a different mix of projects in this plan than we did last year's plan. So if you use just last year's plan, you're not going to be able to execute on all the projects that we've programmed here today. What, again, the committee could decide to do is amend what is before you today and make changes to that and adopt that plan. But if you use the current year plan for next year, that won't allow us to execute on a number of new projects that are shown in this new plan.
So what you're saying is we could actually take that line item and we could copy the line item from last year's 5-year CIP plan, paste it into this line item for this year's, for just that one line item, and approve that budget? Is that what we're saying?
Mark Mathers, for the record, yes, sir. That's what our council has said, yes.
Okay. I think that helps me get across that line. Sorry, I'm writing notes with, on the amendment. What were we talking about, the amendment? The admin building. Let's go back to the admin building. Currently, if I'm seeing this correctly, Wooster was going to be, his pushback, is that what I heard you say? That they pushed Wooster back? Is that because we don't know yet where the admin building's going?
So Wooster is in a different year than was in the previous CIP. It is in those years so that we can make the decisions regarding the admin building and where it's going to go, and a lot of other decisions that need to be made this year, so that we can then do that. Again, it's in FY 31 to 33. Really what we're talking about that we would do this year is what's in line the first year. And the rest of it is a plan, and it's flexible, right? Coming back next year and reassembling it if need be, depending on decisions.
Okay, with that being said, if we're tightening the belt on some projects, maybe not getting a complete rebuilt, but they're getting a modernization, right? And we're flipping some stuff around. I've been pretty consistent about the admin building being ever going ahead of the schools, right, for the kids. Because I want to make sure that, because I know we got some timelines here. Wooster was built in, what, 62? The admin building that we're in right now was built around 56. I think there was an addition in the 70s, 80s, and 2000. There was another remodel addition. So I guess my question becomes, is the admin building taking a haircut too?
Yes, the admin building is taking a haircut in the CIP from last year to this year, and to the tune of approximately $20 million.
So you're going to have to point that out to me, because I'm looking at $8 million in 2027 and $180 million in 2029. And when I look back at the last CIP, it was the same amount of money.
So it was,
Am I seeing this incorrect?
based off.
I've looked at a lot of numbers today, so.
Based off estimates and current construction costs, it was estimated at 200 million with the square footage that we think that would need. It's been reduced down to 180 million in what you see before you. So it is different from last year's CIP, but based off of construction costs and the estimates, that's where we've tagged it.
So basically what we've said is, last year we thought it was going to be a $188 million project. So we budgeted $188 million. This year we think it's going to be a $200 million project. So we're reducing it down to $188 million.
Correct.
We're basically taking our escalation out of it, and we're going to size it accordingly.
That's what this depicts,
Okay.
yes.
Perfect. I have no idea why I have on here, I had written the word amendment with a question mark. Maybe it'll come back later. Thank you.
All right, actually, Tammy, if I could ask a couple of questions as well. Along the lines of the rebuild versus the modernization, I'm concerned about the equity across the district of providing that. And you mentioned that was something that the district would be looking at, but could you help me better understand how you can make that happen if you had something slated for a rebuild because that was seen as the best choice, and now we're gonna try and make it better with what we've got? So if you could help me understand that.
So just like we did at Swope, we did major building systems replacements with that. We kept the bones, but replaced all of those. The bones are still good. It's those individual building systems that we would be upgrading. We'd be going through and looking at all of our ficus for those buildings and doing that to make sure that the structure and those building systems are good and in good working order. We do that for our modernizations. We're replacing clock systems, speaker systems, carpet, all of that as well. So really, we're just keeping the bones. And those assets are still okay for us. And then creating that inside the classrooms, the hub spaces, and new building systems that they can depend on.
And along those lines then, if I'm hearing you correctly, the school district isn't going to have a higher risk down the road with these facilities because, again, using your term, they have good bones. So it's not like we're putting a Band-Aid on a building and hoping it's going to last.
No, because we'll be looking at all of those other systems to make sure that they are in good working order within the next couple of years, right? We even look out past the completion of our construction project to make sure that if we would be coming there in those next couple of years, we incorporate them now.
All right, thank you. Any other questions from the members? Mr. Ivory.
Just so I'm clear, because we're talking about a couple different things here. Worcester is going to, we're still under the same idea that Worcester is going to get a look much like Debbie Smith got, right? Where a big portion of that is completely rebuilt because we're talking about a school that was built in 1962, not that was built in 1980, right? Am I understanding that correctly?
So it states a modernization on here. That can mean many different things once we get to that school and determine their needs and what the funding is that we have set aside for it and what it can purchase us as well. You've seen some of those buildings at Debbie Smith that even the interiors have been redone. We've replaced systems in there as well, and they are gorgeous. And they function for those students and staff perfectly.
So we're not mentioning words. What was Debbie Smith? Was that a reconstruction or was that a new construction?
So Debbie Smith was a combination.
It was a hybrid?
It was a hybrid.
Okay.
Based off of the needs and the way the topography worked and the buildings, existing buildings were there. So it could come down to maybe we rebuild some of it like Debbie Smith and some of it, maybe it gets a whole modernization. We're going to have to look at that and solve that puzzle piece when we get there.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Member Martinez?
Thanks so much. Can you explain to me, like, with the admin building having two sites to look at right now, how that would coincide with the decision that you're going to make for Worcester High School? If ultimately the decision is that the new admin building needs to get built over on the Worcester campus, I'm trying to understand how you put both of those.
I think on this one that we're crossing the line a little bit as far as the agenda item. So we'll have to pass on that one.
Okay. I have a couple other things that I need to understand, if that's okay. If I have, yeah, thank you so much. I guess the other question, that's more of a financial question, and obviously I'm not that's not my background, but I will ask that you, just based on the projection that you have now, you have a bond increase in 29, I believe that was in slide 8, where you have all your graphs. So I'm trying to understand how, at one hand, you're arguing that the flat revenues that are coming in to WC1 funds still allows you to have a bond capacity of 150 million. It just seems like the money is still there and you have the ability to invest in capital projects, but we're choosing to reprioritize the way that the list is going to take place on the timeline based on this new proposal.
Would you like me to comment on that?
Please.
Yeah, Mark Mathers for the record. So what we're saying is that with the flat sales taxes that we've seen, we've had to adjust estimates down. If you look at 4 years ago and the revenue estimates for sales tax, they were much higher than what was in this plan based on the reality of less than 2% growth per year of sales tax. We are, to be clear, projecting increased sales tax and property tax, just not at the levels we had previously projected. So we're still projecting growth, just in the case of sales tax at a much lower rate. Property taxes, I think we've always projected 5% growth or thereabouts. We do continue to foresee growth, just not as much as we used to in the case of sales tax. And that will allow us to issue additional debt and to do the projects that total, even just over the first 5 years, $1 billion. We're not projecting 0% growth each year for the next 10 years. That's not what we're trying to say.
Yeah, I think you said flat. I'm not saying zero, I'm saying flat growth, which it could be up to 2 or 3%.
So we've seen less than 2% growth per year for the last 4 fiscal years. For this plan, we do project 2% a year, kind of that continued flatness. 2% a year, I believe, go back to this slide. We projected 2% growth in fiscal year 27 and 28, then 3% in 29, and 5% thereafter. But
Okay.
you're starting at a lower base, is a lower starting point is what I'm saying, because of that really flat growth since fiscal year 22.
And you're wanting to take more than the minimum coverage levels to ensure that if those projections fall more than you're already modeling now, which is already a conservative model, you have more than adequate room to adjust for that.
So Mark Mathers, again, for the record, that's part of the story. Yes, you're right. It is providing flexibility in case those revenues aren't realized. For example, this does not model a recession, and we're going to have a recession in the next 10 years. So it is to provide some buffer for economic volatility, but it also is to provide the additional bonding capacity in the future. So that again, at the 10-year mark, what this is showing is in total, we would have $300 million in bonding capacity between WC1 and rollover bonds at that 10-year mark. And so that we don't go back to the days of pre-WC1 where we couldn't issue really any sizable debt. So it's really 2 purposes there.
Okay, thanks for exploring those concepts with me. I still go back to my sentiment about the changes that are being implemented and the promises that we made, and my perception that this is not in alignment with those promises that we made to our community. So, thank you.
If I could just comment, I mean, the alternative would have been not to downscale projects and have no bonding capacity after probably year 5, but certainly by year 10. If we had kept to the old plan, we will have maxed out the credit card somewhere between years 5 and 10. And so, you know, it's our professional opinion that we should not do that. But that would be the alternative if someone felt like, I don't agree with this downsizing of projects. Okay, well, you're going to maximize all your bonding capacity within 5 years, and then again, you're going to be left with that scenario like pre-WC1, where there's no money left for any significant project in the future.
Mr. Ivory.
Sorry, only because it's never happened since I've been on this committee. I'd just like a little more clarification. We were outside the bounds of what in our discussion?
Kevin Pick, Deputy Chief General Counsel for the record. So maybe you could explain more in detail. What question were you talking about?
Mr. Martinez had asked a question about Worcester High School or something, and all of a sudden we were outside the bounds of our
Yeah, and it was outside the agenda.
agenda. Thank you.
Yeah, and it was outside the agenda title because it was no longer related to the CIP at that time. The question was more specifically about the details on the AFMP project and where that currently is in those details. It was too far afield from the agenda item, which is the CIP.
Gotcha. Okay. We've been really good with this committee, and I've always, to be honest with you, I've always bragged about how all of our chairs on this committee have really allowed us a lot of rope to have what I consider to be really good conversations in weeding some of this stuff out. So I appreciate the clarification. Thank you.
Mr. Cobb.
Chris Cobb for the record. A lot of questions going on and thrown at you guys. The one thing I truly appreciate, a lot of time and effort in here in trying to have the school district remain healthy with how you're budgeting it. I'm always impressed, your capital renewal, what you have on every school we can see online, and what you do in your efforts to identify what are priorities for capital renewal. It is extremely difficult to project out in the next 10 years. We continue to see changes in our construction. I continue to see issues just with skilled labor in the valley and how many are here to do projects that we're all fighting over between all of us as agencies. So a lot of challenges you're faced with, and I just want you to understand, truly appreciate what your efforts are and what you're proposing to us. Understand that we have struggles swallowing some of it. So, thank you.
Member Bybee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, thank you for the amount of work and the detail of what we're looking at. But the reality, just like we're facing in our city budget, in the state, all of us are facing deficits that have been, and not even that we're overspending, we've gotten hit, all of us have gotten hit with inflation, number one, and other reasons that have affected our budgets and caused those kind of extraordinary deficits that in my 12 years I have not seen. And it's been challenging for all of us. How do we adjust to that? And like you said, it's like our checkbook, and all of us in our homes, how are we and how are residents in this county, in the state, in the country, facing that reality of how, with increased costs, how do you buy gas? How do you buy groceries? Forget trying to buy a home. So all those things that are real, I appreciate the approach to looking at ways we can still provide what we have promised and adjust. And that adjustments that you're making right now, I think I trust you all to really look at the bottom line, what our goal is for all these schools. And I would not support going full bore with what we planned and then not having bonding capacity, or 5 years from now not being able to do anything, bonding or facilities modernization or building new schools, because we could need new schools by then. So for right now, when we have the budget that is so stressed, this seems like a really smart fiscal move that is not going to be detrimental. I think all of you and all of us are very cognizant of what our goal is to provide the very best we can, and I think this provides for that. Regarding the textbook conversation and IT, I don't know if we approve it without where the money would come from that, but more importantly, the fact is property tax, but to Mr. Cobb's point, I think being very clear about that and how we message that and even how it's presented here might be helpful in our overall capital funding. And Mr. Ivory's point, what is WC1? So how much of this that we're paying for is WC1 money, and then how much of everything else in the capital improvement plan is property tax and sales? Sales tax is WC1. So sales tax compared to the WC1 property tax, being real clear so that the public knows, so that we can stand behind and say, yes, this is where the money, and legally, we're on legal grounds, and we are continuing to do what our job is, which is the oversight of, and I feel like Mr. Ivory, we are not just responsible, this committee, and I was on oversight before it became Capital Funding Protection Committee, we are responsible for all capital funding and protecting that and oversight for all of our schools, which includes WC1, but is also the property tax side of it too. Thank you.
Any other questions? And actually, just want to read, actually, it's off of slide 2. It says, "The district must continue to be financially responsible stewards of our capital resources." And I think that's the point. I mean, I can see that we are struggling with the definition of capital resources, and I appreciate the conversation that's taken place here, and I think it's gone well. I believe we've allowed the members to ask all their questions, and with that, then we'll go ahead and open it up for public comment.
Aaron Danielson?
Thank you. My name is Erin Danielson, and I'm the lead counselor and one of our advisors for our Student Advisory Board. Worcester High School is more than a campus. It is a diverse, high-performing community that reflects the strength of Washoe County. As an international baccalaureate school, a bilingual school, and a culturally rich learning environment, Worcester serves students with unique and evolving needs. The proposed 65 to 80 million modernization is an important step forward. However, we strongly advocate that Worcester is not simply aligned to a standard model, but intentionally prioritized. Worcester deserves facilities that reflect the rigor of IB and college preparatory programming, learning spaces that support multilingual and inclusive education, modern environments that match the innovation already happening in the classrooms, continued community voice, and transparency throughout the planning process. This is an opportunity to invest not just in infrastructure, but in equity, access, and student success. We recognize the importance of a well-designed central services facility and appreciate the district's thoughtful, data-informed approach. As this plan develops, we strongly encourage intentional consideration of school communities, especially those near proposed sites, ensuring projects enhance, not disrupt, existing campuses, and continued transparency and community engagement. Strategic infrastructure decisions should always remain grounded in student impact. Student voice matters at Worcester, and we would like to personally thank Adam Searcy and Tammy Zimmerman with our sincere appreciation for the ongoing commitment for engaging with the Student Advisory Board at Worcester. To be quite frank with you, our community knows nothing about what is happening in their community. That is a fact. But their willingness, Adam and Tammy, to listen, collaborate, and elevate student perspectives is essential to the meaningful planning and reflects the values that we want to see across all initiatives. Worcester is a community worth investing in boldly, intentionally, and visibly. We are an international baccalaureate school, we are a bilingual school, and we are Worcester since 1961, by the way.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And that's all the public comment we have?
Emiliano Gomez Meza?
Hello, my name is Emiliano Gomez Meza, and I'm a student at Worcester High School. I'd like to thank you all for taking the time to plan the future of our district. I want to speak from a student perspective because while these plans are discussed in meetings, like Ms. Danielson said, not a lot of students at Worcester, just seeing them every day, they don't know exactly what's going on, and we're the ones who have to live in the spaces that you guys are discussing about every day. And I want to be very clear, Worcester students want to feel valued, and right now a basic modernization, by the looks of it, does not fully reflect the value that a complete rebuild would. Worcester is not just another school. We are an IB school, we're a bilingual school, and one of the most diverse communities in the district. And this means that our needs are different, and they require intentional planning, not just alignment to a standard model, like Ms. Anderson also said. I know your job is to get all schools in the district to the same standard and on the same page, but Worcester, you can't do that with Worcester because we're just simply not like any other school in the district whatsoever. And modernization is a good step, but it shouldn't be the end goal. We need spaces that are designed with purpose, spaces that reflect who we are as a diverse and globally minded student body. They need to reflect the level of academic rigor we're expected to meet through IB. and they're supposed to reflect the pride that we have in being part of the Worcester community. And right now there's a disconnect. We're being asked to think critically, collaborate, and prepare for the future, but our environment doesn't always support that. And when that happens, it can feel like our experience isn't being prioritized. And this plan that you're proposing is an opportunity to change that, but only if it's done intentionally and it's consistent. Being intentional and being consistent would mean not just updating the buildings or furnishings, but investing in the student experience and not just following a model, but designing for Worcester specifically. Not just improving the facilities, but showing the students that they matter just as much as any future projects or a new admin building. We want to matter just as much because we do matter. Again, I'd like to echo that we'd like to thank Adam Searcy and Tammy Zimmerman because they've showed a lot of engagement with our student advisory boards, and we appreciate that a lot because that hearing the students' voice is exactly what we need more of right now with so many different projects going on. At the end of the day, it's bigger than just construction and cost. It's about meeting the needs of students, and I hope that my student perspective can provide that reminder that who we're doing this for at the end of the day. Worcester is a strong, proud community, and we're worth more than a standard modernization, and we're worth thoughtful, intentional investment. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Pablo Nava Duran.
Thank you. My name is Paul Duan, and and why I'm opposed to having a moderation at Worcester High School, rather put it back forward, and while in Central Allen Mill moving forward and build like on Worcester baseball field, where the Worcester baseball field where they're gonna play goes because they're gonna cut down the baseball team because those students many of those baseball players were zone school. If you build a new admin building, we're going to have a new baseball field. Someone else going outside of school or cut the baseball team, because my biggest concern the open space on the Worcester athletics. So, if we put a new admin building here, I don't think Worcester, rebuild Worcester should not be on a Worcester campus if a new admin building were built. So that I'm thoughtful for that. But I think the district should keep a Worcester campus if Worcester repurpose. But it should be built on like CTE, Academy, or like IB school, something like hybrid or neighborhood school, have a zone school, pick a bus for IB school. I think about creative. What the modern Worcester, but if Worcester, I don't think if a modern school at the declining enrollment, I know it's hard to have a declining enrollment at Worcester, but I think it's a more opportunity to make it as a academy or hybrid, like have a zone school, go here, meet different people from outside of the school zone. Something to think about it. Thank you.
The committee also received email public comment from Justin Solamine.
All right. Thank you very much. And with that, we'll go ahead and bring it back to the committee members. And do we have someone that's willing to make a motion?
I'll make a motion, unless you want it.
Well, I was just going to ask another quick question.
Go ahead.
I hear public comment. I'm a little sorry.
Member Ivory.
Sorry. For the record, Justin Ivory. If I'm looking at this correctly, I guess we don't typically address public comment, I guess, because we probably don't get much of it. I don't want to set a precedence here, but I'm looking at our budget now, Tammy, and because we're going out 10 years, we've actually got $79 million budgeted for Worcester High School. In our last 5 years CIP, we had $24 million.
That takes into account inflation, and that initial, the year 2031 is design phase funding, so year 2032 is actual construction phase, and then typically that next year would be FF&E for that, so.
Okay, so I just want to make sure I'm getting, so are we pushing it back then? Is that what we're doing?
Yes, it is being pushed back in the years.
How many years are we pushing it back?
I think it's going back, we started initial design this year. As we recall, but you guys approved some design phase funding for it.
Yep.
So it should be, it could have been up further, close to starting in 27, 28. But we have some decisions to make that we want, this is a placeholder at this time, right?
Gotcha.
To allow us flexibility so that we can make those decisions that we need to make in this fiscal year, so we know how to plan in the future. As we've-
Gotcha, so
right.
it may not even move back.
It may not. We could come next year.
Next year, it might be
We
forward.
could, right?
Okay.
You could come next year and say, we've made decisions, and this CIP looks different from last year,
Sure.
quite a bit different, right? Next year could look different, again, depending on what happens, what decisions are made, what the revenue looks like. So this is a plan, it's a blueprint that we start with to work from, and every year we're going to revisit it. And we're going to be back to you guys to have it approved again next year. And every project has to come back before you guys for design phase funding, construction, and all of that. So you'll get to see those changes, and we'll work through those changes.
Okay, so in interest of not getting the cart in front of the horse, why are we designing a school that we're currently thinking we're pushing back, or let me tread lightly, that we're not even sure we have a campus for?
Internally, we have stopped the consultant, knowing that this was coming, in January, December, January, knowing that this may be coming forward and that we're investigating that campus already. So we haven't moved very far forward from just a conceptual because of these decisions that need to be made.
Gotcha, so we are currently then on hold with any design aspect. We're not designing something that may just end up being papers
Correct.
that don't get used?
Yes.
Okay. I think I'm clear now. Thank you.
Okay, and I believe that we had someone that was willing to make a motion. Oh, another question.
Yeah, I was curious. I just want to clarify. I don't mean to say that we are not being responsible stewards of the financials of WC1 in the capacity that we have. What I am saying is that the plans that were presented out into the community are very different than what's being proposed today, and none of that has been daylighted. All of the internal decisions that have been made, like stopping the consultants, which we heard today, are things that haven't been told to the rest of our community, and there were promises that were made, and we're not making irrational decisions that are irresponsible financially, but we are going against what was presented, at least in the Neighborhood Advisory Board meeting for Ward 3 that I was at, and some of the other elementary school meetings that I attended that were community meetings that were held. And so I just want to make the record clear that I'm not saying this body or that the district is being financially irresponsible stewards of this money.
All right. One more call for questions. Last call, okay. Do we have someone that's willing to make a motion?
Yes, Elise Pankowski for the record. So I'm going to try to word this right, Mr. Ivory. So here we go. All right. I make a motion that we move to approve the Capital Funding Protection Committee fiscal year 2027 10-year capital improvement plan with the removal of the textbook line item and the corresponding budget.
Okay, we have a motion that's been made. Are we allowed to answer a question during that time before a second?
Do you need a second first?
We do, and, well, exactly, we do. And it should be and to forward the recommendation to the Board of Trustees for final approval, if we could add that at the end.
Okay. So to make the amendment and then to add the Board of Trustees for final approval.
And forward to the Board of Trustees.
Correct. All right, so we have a motion on the table with an amendment.
Chris Cobb, I'll second with
Okay.
discussion.
We have a motion from Member Bankowski, a second by Cobb. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
Sorry, Member Ivory, my only question would be just a clarification. So you're saying we're going to remove the textbooks. So what are we placing the value then of the IT refresh? Are we going back down to the $3 million because we're reducing screen time for young children? Or are we still keeping it at the $5 million that we had it at in last year's CIP?
So Elise Bankowski for the record, I assume that if we reduce it, then they could come back and put it back to 5 at a later date? Or does that stop it? So when they come back for the 10-year next year, then it can go back to 5 million?
Mark Mathers for the record. I mean, it's not clear to me. It sounds like the motion would zero out both the PC refresh and textbook budget for year one, and that would be, right, that would create issues. If your motion is to, I think your motion, just to be clear, needs to set a dollar value
Okay.
for PC refresh. What I hear your motion being is that you want to remove funding of textbooks out of the 10-year CIP, preserve PC refresh, and then we'd need a dollar amount.
That's exactly what I was saying, but my question comes down to, last year, we had $5 million in there for the TI refresh. This year, you're telling us that we went to $7 million, so we reduced the CI, a TI refresh down, and then added textbooks to it. So I guess our question to you is going to be, in order to come up with a budgetary number to put in as a friendly amendment, perhaps, we need to know what that budget amount is, no pressure.
So just to be clear, the year one proposed budget is 6.5, 3.5 for PC refresh, and 3 for textbooks. And so if you wanted to remove funding of textbooks, then the budget would come down for just PC refresh to 3.5.
Okay, could we do that as a friendly amendment? So I would offer a friendly amendment that we cap it at 3.5 for just the TI refresh.
All right, let's try this again. Elise Bankowski for the record. I make a motion to approve that the Capital Funding Protection Committee approves the fiscal year 2027 10-year capital improvement plan with the removal of the textbook line item and the corresponding $3 million budget for textbooks, putting that budget at $3.5 million for the PC refresh, and forward this to the Board of Trustees for final approval.
Okay, are you willing to amend your second?
Approve the second.
All right.
More discussion.
Yes. Member Bybee.
Charlene Bybee for the record. So if we remove the textbook funding, will there be no textbooks? Or where would the funding for that come from if it doesn't come out of the property tax revenue source that we're currently using? Where would the money come from, or would there just be no textbooks?
That's an excellent question, and I think that will be a Board of Trustee decision. So if this motion were to pass, the amended CIP comes to the board. They have, I guess, 3 basic choices. They could not agree and return the original CIP back to this committee for further consideration. So that's option 1. Option 2 is, so let me give, just to be clear, this concept helped provide for a balanced budget for the district. Without funding textbooks through the capital plan, we would have a $3 million operating deficit. So the second option would be the board could, if not fund textbooks next year and have a balanced budget, or if they went, or they could choose to fund textbooks and incur a $3 million deficit. I guess a wrinkle to that is they could consider further budget reductions to achieve a balanced budget. If they wanted to do textbooks, rather than have a $3 million deficit, they could consider fairly dramatic operating cuts. And again, not more than 90% of our budget are salaries and benefits of positions. So I guess that would be a fourth option they could consider, go back to the drawing board. And, you know, we reduced quite a number of positions in our operating budget this year. And that would be a decision they'd be confronted with too. So those are all the options the board would have to consider in terms of this capital improvement program and the impact on the operating budget.
Real quick follow-up, Mr. Chair. So, question on the textbooks. You said that you're going to be cutting back on the IT and screen time for lower grades. Would that mean that you had to factor in more textbooks? Or did it affect the textbook expenditures? Are they higher because you're not doing the screen time and devices, or is it even relative
No,
to that?
So, sorry, Mark Mathers for the record. That is a great question. When we buy textbooks, sorry, we're getting really into the weeds, and you can either buy the hard copy textbooks, you can buy electronic versions of the textbooks, or you can buy you can buy. Usually, when you buy the hard copy, they give you the electronic version free. So there is some interplay between the PC refresh program and how one orders textbooks. And so I'm overcomplicating my answer. I mean, I just want to acknowledge your question is a complicated one. I guess what we did, we haven't presupposed a more aggressive use of electronic textbooks, if that answers your question. So we have historically budgeted $3 million a year for textbooks in our operating budget. And up to this point, they've been hard textbooks like you and I used in school, right? And so that's where the $3 million came from. And again, we took a look at our PC refresh, being sensitive to the costs to that would be allocated to the capital program, and are reducing the PC refresh budget from 5 to 3.5 million.
Member Bunkowski? Okay. All right. Any other questions? With that, we'll go ahead and go to vote with the first and second being made to an amended motion. And with all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
No.
No?
So we have, if I heard correctly, 2 no votes.
Can I get the noes? We're-
Member Martinez?
Martinez
And
then
Bybee?
Okay.
And with that, then, the motion does pass 4-2. All right, we'll move on to item 2.03, presentation discussion on construction phase funding for the new elementary school on the current Edward L. Pine Middle School campus for demolition in the amount of $4,200,000.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Teresa Polson, the Director of Design and Capital Projects. Okay. First, I want to start out by letting everyone know I do have our architect in the audience tonight. VWB Architects is here, as well as a few people from Core Construction who have helped with our pre-construction phase during this project. This is a very, very exciting proposal for you. I know we're just talking about a request for funding for demolition, but we do have a new prototype for an elementary school, so we're really, really excited to show it to you. Starting with a little bit of history. Of course, you all know back in December of 2023, the FMP was approved by the board. In January of 2025, or let me say as part of that FMP, it was recommended that capital projects go back and do a study for both Pine and Trainer to determine whether or not we may turn those schools into a pre-K through 8 school moving forward. So a committee was formed to do that study, and the outcome of that was that it was recommended that those sites be maintained as a pre-K through 5 school. So that is how we move forward with Pine. That same year, it was approved that the Smith Ridge Elementary School would be closed and repurposed along with Pine Middle School to be repurposed into that pre-K through 5. That led us to, of course, rezoning of those area schools, where we took many options to the zoning committee for review, and ultimately was determined that all of the Smith Ridge students, of course, from that closed school would go to Pine, as well as portions of students from Donner Springs and Corbett Elementary. So we began design with VWB. We started with concept design, but we also tasked them with doing a full building assessment of the existing Pine Middle School, whether or not we should potentially try and keep the building shell of that school to try and reuse it for the new elementary school, or tear it down and build a new school. So they completed that task for us, and ultimately, as you can see, the new school was a little bit less expensive than doing the existing school. Potentially, there was a few reasons for that. Structurally, seismically, that building would have needed a lot of work. We would have had to dig out around all the footings, perimeter footings, column footings, that type of thing to reinforce them, which was going to cost a lot of money. In addition, we would have, normally proposed to keep like the bathrooms, the stairs, and that type of thing when you're keeping the shell of the building, but those were not to ADA, so those would have need to be completely redone. Lastly, the ceilings at that school, pretty low. We had columns, because of the design of that school, had columns about every 30 feet, and so just really very kind of limiting to the design of the school with the potential new prototype, and to align with the new schools that we're trying to achieve and the feel of those schools. So we started full design in October of 2025. At that time, we did form a steering committee to help guide us in the design of the new prototype. In addition, we did meet with all of the newer prototype school principals to get their feedback and lessons learned from those new schools. And we got some really good, valuable feedback. So we do have some kind of fun additions for this prototype. We didn't do a lot, but I think they're small, meaningful additions. We had a neighborhood advisory board committee meeting. It was a requirement also of the city of Reno for the conditional use permit, which is going to be going to Planning Commission in June. We also held 2 community meetings at Pine Middle School to get some feedback and show everybody in the community the new designs that are coming. Just wanted to show everyone the existing site as it sits today as a reminder. Those softball fields will remain so that the community continue to use them as well as the school. So this is our new site plan. Our new plan the building has a new north-south orientation, and the entrance will be now on Neal Road. And that was actually a direct request by the city because Neal is a road that's capable of handling larger traffic flows. Oops. So that is the way we oriented the building. The entrance of the building is, I wish I had a pointer on this thing, but you could see the crosswalk on the east side of the building, west side of the building. That crosswalk goes straight to the entrance that's in the middle of the building. You'll enter the parking lot from the south end. We have 3 very long student drop-off lanes, and then all the cars would exit on the north end onto Neal Road. We are making some off-site improvements in the middle of Neal Road too to accommodate people coming out of that driveway can turn left or they can turn right. On the north end of the site, we have another parking lot for staff parking, as well as a separate bus drop-off that we usually always try to include, that separate bus drop-off. On the top right, you'll see a little looped drive. That is intended to be a secondary student drop-off. However, that will be included as an alternate design right now in our plans in case we need to cut it for budget reasons. You can see that we've got a really nice playground. We've added some soccer pitches into this playground. We have added a shade structure. It's in the middle of the playground. You can't see it right now. It's not on this plan, but it is included. We also have another area that's attached to the building. It's an overhang. It's about 3,000 square feet for an additional instructional shaded structure area. We've included some swing sets as well, which we have not done in some time. I don't know if anybody has mentioned to capital funding yet, but we have gotten some direction from the board to amend our education specifications to include more shade in our playgrounds as well as some swings and some other things. So that's why you're seeing those in this plan where we typically may not have them. We're doing coordination with City of Reno in regards to these fields because they are shared use. So we're staying in contact about the schedule. And we are planning on using these fields for our boreholes for the ground source heat pump system, so that those fields will be completely regrassed, returfed when we're done. So this is our new prototype floor plan. The plan on the left is the first floor. So again, in the center area, that's sort of the dark salmon color, that is the entry. To the top of that is our administration area, and right below that is our new media area. It's approximately 107,000 square feet. It's 32 classrooms with a capacity of about 700, which is similar to our other schools, depending on special programs and that type of thing. The main added design component that we've included in this is an activity room. One of the big pieces of feedback that we did get from the principals and the steering committee was that the combined activity / multi-purpose room that's in our current prototypes just isn't working. It's really not being used at all for activities because I think really the lunch periods are so long. They take time to set up for lunch. There's typically 2 or 3 lunch periods at each school, and then they're tearing down, and there's just really not time for them to utilize that, the NPR as an activity room. We have those basketball hoops and things, and they're just not being utilized. So we did add a separate activity room. You'll see it in the very light blue section in the middle of the plan. It's going to be a very nice multi-purpose space where we've designed it to have some risers in the back that can be used sort of a stage for presentations and plays and that type of thing. Can be used obviously for physical activity, community events, professional development, et cetera, right? It can be used for many, many things. We have also designed it so that in the middle between the activity room and the big pink box is the multi-purpose room, a very large door that can connect those 2 spaces. So it can be even opened up to even a larger space for other larger events. The yellow spaces you see are what we call our student hubs that we have in all of our schools. We have 3 of those. And I think I've covered everything. Music room is just north of the activity room, and the STEAM lab is just south of that activity room. That was another improvement that we made, and based on comments that we received, that we did split up the STEAM and the media lab. We originally have them designed together at those original prototypes with a rolling door in between those 2 rooms, but the feedback was they were just too loud for the media center, and so we did split those up. All the classrooms are on the perimeter that you see in sort of the light beige color. Second floor is pretty much a mirror of the first floor. And again, we have group rooms, small group rooms. We have a separate entrance on the sort of middle of the plan toward the north. But we do have a separate entrance there for a family resource center slash community and school space too. So there's space there for the community to meet and with food, pantry, and clothing and that type of thing. All right, so we have a really nice video fly through that the architect has provided for us. Okay. All right, so I hope you like that. I think Van Wert, Bugatti, Angela specifically, they tried really hard to create a design and colors for this school that are really culturally inclusive, because we know there's going to be a lot of different kids from a lot of different areas coming to this school. And we're still working on all that, but we are very proud of it. All right, moving on to our construction phase funding request for demolition phase 1. First I want to highlight, which I did not show here, that this demolition phase is a hard bid. We decided to go that route for this phase because it's a fairly straightforward scope of work, pretty simple, and saves us a little time in bidding overall. So we did receive a third-party estimate for the demolition. So our total estimate is $4.2 million for this phase. You'll see professional services detail listed below. Significant cost, obviously, is the hazard material oversight consulting is specifically, higher than normal because this is a pretty large building with a lot of hazardous materials. Our construction management, FF&E, and salvage, there's quite a bit to deal with when you're emptying an old school in regards to FF&E and salvage. So that is what those costs are associated with. So we included this slide just to give you an overall picture of where we're at with the larger project. So the $77 million you see there is really our construction budget at the moment. And then to the right of that, you'll see an $81.5 million item, and that is Core's current schematic design estimate. Obviously, that's conservative, but we wanted to kind of show a range at this point in time since we are only at schematic design level. So our range for our total project is currently at 89.4 to 93.9. Just real quick, going over our ideas for our phasing for this project. The Phase 1 hard bit that we're here to talk about today is really the demolition, the abatement of the building, doing a limited site work, and then utility demolition. And that really is planned to start in June and go through November, December. What we're calling Phase 2 will be basically the mass grading, I should say Phase 2 GMP 1, mass grading. And then we plan on doing our ground source wells, drilling those wells in our Phase 1 to get those out of the way, roughly December 26th to March. And then our GMP 2 would be our construction of the new building and then the remainder of the site improvements, finishing up in May of 2028. So obviously, we are going to hopefully take a recommendation to the board next week for this demolition phase. And then we would plan on taking it out to bid immediately thereafter. And then June, award that bid for demolition to a contractor at the joint June board meeting. So our Phase 2 next steps, basically, we would come back to this committee in August to ask for full phase funding for the remainder of the project, GMP 1 and GMP 2, and then start construction in December, anticipating again finishing up in May of 2028. That concludes my presentation. Does anyone have questions?
All right, thank you very much. We'll open it up for questions. Member Bybee?
It's beautiful, and I love the colors especially. Question on, so this, if this all starts this summer, where are the students at Pine and the other, when is all the shifting happening? And where will those students go? Where are all the Pine students going? I should know this, but I don't.
Yeah, no, that's okay. We are closing Pine as of June. And all of those students will be going to Vaughn Middle School because Vaughn will be opening, doing the grand opening in fall. So they'll be going to Vaughn this fall. Yep, sure.
Any other questions? Mr. Ivory.
For the record, Justin Ivory, just real quick, because I'm sure you got this number, because I'm sure you anticipated this question. How much, can you explain out the construction services number, or construction management number, please?
For the demolition phase, I'm assuming, at $315,000?
Wait, that's the only construction management that we're approving today, correct?
Correct.
Okay, I just want to make sure.
Correct.
Make sure
So
I didn't
that
miss
is
something.
both district staff, a combination of district staff and professional consulting to manage the construction during demolition. I don't know the breakdown of that. I don't know if Tammy might know that. But discussions with Tony, our director of construction, was that it was a combination of both consulting and in-house staff. Because I don't think we have the in-house staff quite available yet to
I have
take
the
on that
utmost
role in full.
confidence that Mrs. Zimmerman has the answer I'm looking for.
The answer you're looking for. So pending hiring a couple of PCIs that are out there right now, and we're looking at that, we're anticipating, if we hire those, that this will be done in-house.
That's
But
exactly what I'd love to hear.
If we don't, then we have to re-examine and see how we sit. So we did do both of them here, thinking that maybe we would have to if we didn't hire those two positions.
Okay, and then the hazardous material oversight. So this was built in the 63, so what kind of hazardous materials are we looking to oversee?
Lead and asbestos everywhere.
Okay.
Yeah.
What's the duration of the project? Of the demolition?
The demolition is roughly 4 to 5 months.
So I'm pretty sure I'm understanding this correctly. The hazardous material oversight is just that, it's oversight. They're not actually out there bagging up.
Correct.
So we have a contractor that's,
Yes.
a contractor that's going to bag it up. So we're basically having to pay roughly $40,000 a month for somebody to stand and watch and make sure somebody's bagging it up correctly?
Absolutely. And then they do the testing for afterwards, where they do all the air sampling testing and what we call lead wipes and that type of thing, and then they send them to the lab to make sure everything's clear. They do air clearances, so we do this for every project. It's a big
Okay,
deal.
and I'm assuming that this amount falls in percentage-wise, a range in which you guys have done stuff like all the demo stuff that was done at Debbie Smith and any other place. I'm assuming that it all falls in that same criteria?
Yes, this is very similar to Debbie Smith, and it falls within that range.
Okay,
Yes.
and then going back to the construction management portion of it, it's basically 7.5% of the contract. Does that tend to fall about what we normally spend?
Yes, and that's an estimate based off of the time that we believe, once we get a contractor on board, get their scheduled values, gets their schedules for everything, we might be able to define that even more. But this actually has a little bit of a contingency on it, just based off of previous projects and that.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
Any other questions? All right, well, this was for discussion only, so we're going to move on to item 2.04, which is an action item. Presentation, discussion, possible action to approve $4.2 million to the 2025-2026 C Major Projects Program for projects throughout Washoe County School District, and to forward the recommendation to future meetings of the Board of Trustees for approval.
I don't know that there's much more to say. This is Tammy Zimmerman, Chief Facilities Management Officer. We're asking for you, the capital funding, to recommend this for approval to the Board of Trustees so that we can commence this construction and start the beautiful building that you've seen in the fly-through.
All right, do we have any further discussion from the members? This is an action item, so we'll open it up for public comment. Do we have any public comment?
There's no public comment.
All right, and with that, we'll bring it back, and do we have a motion?
Chris Cobb, I move that the Capital Funding Project Committee approves $4.2 million to the 2025/2026 C Major Projects Program.
Thank you. And do we have a second?
I'll second that motion. Charlene Bybee for the record.
All right, we have a motion by Member Cobb, a second by Bybee. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? No. We have one no vote. And the motion passes. Thank you. All right, we're going to come back to item 3.01 for a public comment. Do we have any closing public comment?
There's no more public comment.
All right, thank you. 3.02, announcements of the next meeting. Officially, the next meeting is going to be June 4th, 2026. And then we'll move on to 3.03, adjournment. We adjourn.